Remember, and most people don't know this, the Republican Party is the party of Abraham Lincoln. Not bad. Not bad. It's also the party of freedom, equality, and opportunity. People have forgotten it so long now. It is the Democratic Party that is the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow, and the party of opposition. Nothing makes me more honored and proud than to be the nominee of Abraham Lincoln's Republican Party, and we're going to do a job. Our party will fight to bring hope to every forgotten stretch of this country. Once again, we will be one American nation. One American nation. We will be one united people. And we will have one really great future again. Believe me.
Since Democrats have done everything in their power to make sure that no one knows the history of the Democratic Party, let's just call this little exercise Pin the Tail on the Donkey. And because I'm a conservative and can operate from a background of, the truth, then let me say right at the beginning that I don't expect you to take my word for any of this. You just be sure to go on out there and look it all up. Okay, here we go. Now, as with the 2016 presidential slate, the Democratic Party is much older than the young Republicans, so let's start Pin the Tail on the Donkey with the first presidential cycle that had a Republican in the race. In 1856, the election was a three-way affair between Democrat James Buchanan, American Party candidate Millard Fillmore, and John C. Fremont, representing the fresh-out-of-the-box Republican Party, otherwise known to Democratic hecklers as the Black Republican Party. That was a racial slur used by the Democrats since the Republican Party was created specifically from disaffected Whigs in order to combat slavery. That's why the Republican Party was formed. Now, here are the results: a big Democratic win without a majority for James Buchanan, who would go on to secure the Democratic Party trifecta of having the three worst chief executives in American history: James Buchanan, Jimmy Carter, and President Golf Cart. Now, Buchanan sat for 4 years and watched the Civil War approaching. If there had been golf courses back then, he would have been on them, and maybe he would have taken the top spot. But as it was, he said in private he was going to be the last president of the United States, and he very nearly was. All Buchanan wanted was to survive his term before the shooting started. And so the job of, saving America fell to the next Republican candidate in 1860. Now, what most people don't realize about the election of Abraham Lincoln was that the 7 states of the deep Confederacy had left the Union before Lincoln even took office. Not only did the Republican not carry a single slaveholding state, there were entire counties in the Democratic South where he did not receive a single popular vote, not even one, not even as a joke or a protest. That's because the slaveholding, racist, Democratic states and politicians that had just left the Union to form the Confederacy knew that the election of a Republican president meant the end of slavery in America. You see this flag that modern Democrats try to pin on Republicans? It was invented, as was the entire Confederacy, because Democrats walked out of the Union because once a Republican president had been elected, slavery was finished in America. Now, that's why the person perhaps most singly responsible for ending slavery in America, the brilliant and courageous Frederick Douglass, once wrote, quote, "I'm a Republican, a black, dyed-in-the-wool Republican, and I never intend to belong to any other party than the party of freedom and progress." Don't believe me? Look it up. Moving on. In 1864, 1 year after Republican Abraham Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation, the Democrats ran as their candidate George B. McClellan. Now, Lincoln had appointed the little Napoleon to command the Army of the Potomac, march down to Richmond, and end the war. But McClellan, who kept demanding more men, more wagons, more artillery, and more time, never seemed to get around to it, until finally he did, where he was promptly whipped by Robert E. Lee in the Peninsula Campaign. Now, although personally for continuing the war, McClellan bowed to the Democratic Party platform that called for immediate peace with the Confederacy, a move that would have ended the war and also given us 2 countries, one in which their cherished institution of slavery stayed intact. Now, one of the most influential Democratic delegates of 1864 was Clement Vallandigham from Ohio. He had called the Civil War to end slavery, quote, a wicked, cruel, and unnecessary war, unquote. His call for the Constitution as it is and the Union as it was became the de facto Democratic Party platform of 1864. The Union as it was, of course, meant the Union where slavery would be allowed to continue as it had under Democratic presidents. Unfortunately for the formerly Democrat and now Confederate slaveholders, the Confederacy lost that war, but they immediately went into overdrive in order to win the peace for racism. I hate to break it to you, but it was defeated Democrats that started the Ku Klux Klan, and it was these same former and then once again Democrats that created in the years right after the Civil War two modern institutions, gun control and marriage licenses. Gun control was enacted by Southern Democrats in order to keep guns out of the hands of newly freed black people. And marriage licenses, you know, the idea that the government could tell people who could marry whom, was invented by Democrats to prevent black people from marrying white people. Don't believe me? Look it up. All of those lynchings, those were Democrats. The first black senators and representatives, they were all Republicans, including these two men. Republican Hiram Revels, the first black member of Congress, and Joseph Ramey, who became pro tempore Speaker of the House of Representatives and who received death threats from Southern Democrats for his efforts to suppress the KKK by force. Charming people, these Democrats, aren't they? It was Southern Democrats that wrote the Jim Crow laws that segregated the South in the century after the Civil War, and it was the post-Reconstruction elections of these Southern Democrats that were responsible for colored-only drinking fountains and colored-only cafeteria spaces and all the rest. Now, while it's hard to talk about the history of the Democratic Party without their incessant racism, which continues to this day, let's just very quickly look at Democratic economics. Now, between 1920 and 1921, the United States entered its first actual depression. You probably haven't heard of it because it didn't last very long, and it didn't last very long because a Republican named Calvin Coolidge was president at the time, facing an economic slowdown at least as severe as the one that was to follow a decade later. Coolidge, being a Republican, cut the tax rate from 73%. In a few years, it became 24%. And he slashed federal spending by half. Shockingly, slashing the amount of money businessmen had to pay in taxes gave them more money to spend on their businesses, and that's exactly what they did. They were out of the Depression within a year or so, and the rest of the decade was called the Roaring Twenties because it was the economy that was roaring. Now, 10 years later, a Democratic president, Franklin Roosevelt, was faced with a similar set of problems. Roosevelt didn't cause the Depression, but his policies did turn it into the Great Depression. Unlike Republican Coolidge, who cut taxes and federal spending, FDR, the Democrat, raised the tax rate to 94% on the people who had the money to invest in getting businesses back on their feet. That money went to Washington for feel-good public works programs that created no new wealth at all, instead of letting businesses get back to work. What Coolidge killed in 2 years, Roosevelt's policies grew and nurtured into an 11-year Great Depression catastrophe that gutted this country so severely that people simply let him get away with anything he wanted, including most of the social welfare vote buying that has turned what was once the richest country in the world into the most indebted country in the world. Now, the Donkey Party also got their hoofs into the Constitution, and that's not a pretty tale either. I could and have, in fact, done about an hour on each of the three big progressive amendments, but we don't have that kind of time. So, in a nutshell, the 16th Amendment gave us the income tax so that today you can send about half of your money to Democrats in Washington for them to buy votes with. The 17th Amendment gave all of your power to Democrats in Washington by changing the way that people were elected to the Senate, the House of the States, which had previously protected states' interests and power, but which now became sort of a glorified country club. And, of course, the 18th Amendment, prohibition, which deprived you of your ability to have a drink at the end of the day to soften the blow of all of these racist and economic nightmares Democrats have inflicted upon America. By the way, it took Democrats to pass the only constitutional amendment to actually take away an existing freedom. It's kind of what they do, taking away people's freedom, but back to race. When those attack dogs were unleashed on black children trying to go to school in the South in the early 1960s, they were unleashed by Democrats like Bull Connor, Lester Maddox, and George Wallace. And when those fire hoses were turned on peaceful black protesters, those orders came from those same Democrats. So, why does black America vote so solidly Democratic? Well, the Democrats will tell you that the teams switch sides. You know, I didn't happen to get that memo. You know, the memo saying that all the racists now have to leave the Democratic Party and become Republicans, and all of the slavery-hating Republicans have to suddenly join the hated party of the Confederate battle flag, the KKK, and Jim Crow. I didn't get the memo because the memo doesn't exist. No one switched sides. The entire idea is ridiculous. It didn't happen. But something did happen. There was a switch, all right. And it was a switch masterminded by the great Democratic champion of black America, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Realizing that the South was emerging from its racist past to start voting Republican, he knew the game was over, and then he had an epiphany. Republicans and Democrats didn't switch sides, but the Democrats most certainly did switch strategies. And that switch in strategy can best be summed up by a direct quote from Democratic President Lyndon Baines Johnson, who said in the presence of two Southern governors, and I quote, "I'll have those voting Democratic for the next 200 years. And so far, he has. Because that was the new strategy for the Democrats, you see, and it's worked like a charm. Buy the votes of black America with handouts. You know, just enough to keep them coming back every 2 years. It's a Democratic vote plantation is what it is. And black America is enslaved to it as thoroughly as they were when they were slaves under Democratic politicians and policies, as we've just seen. The Democrats have hired, and at sub-minimum wage, I might add, black America to vote for them in exchange for crappy housing, crappy food, crappy EBT cards, and crappy Obama phones. And if you're a black American who's wondering why things just get worse and worse for black America, well, your answer is that when it comes to your Democratic benefactors, you're not a customer. You're an employee. You're a minimum wage employee. We Republicans find this entire entitlement slavery disgusting. We want no part of it. The Republican Party was formed in opposition to slavery of any kind, and it remains that way to this day. So why haven't you heard about this horrible tale that belongs to that donkey? Well, it's because of what my friend and colleague Andrew Klavan calls the Democratic ring of power. It's the press, or in Andrew's words, they're precious. Like the ring of power, it grants Democrats the power of invisibility. The power to come back again and again and again with their policies of economic failure and racial slavery, secure in the knowledge that no one will ever see what they did the last time they tried it. It's kind of a shame about the internet, because now all of you can go and look all of this up for yourself. Anyway, that's whom we're dealing with, so go find out for yourself how true all of this is, and then for your own sake and the sake of the country, don't be an ass.
Every black person should vote Republican at least once in this election cycle. I can dig it. Rock on, Stephen. But getting them to do that only once is like getting an obese person to try salad. Just once. Sure, it'll be really good for them, but when they don't see the immediate effects of eating that salad, they'll go back to their earlier eating habits and look for any excuse to reject proper diet and exercise and try to convince themselves that they're happy with being who they are while being miserable about it. Following through with that analogy would be, here's the Democrats with their restaurant. They got pizza, pie, and ice cream. You can eat all you want because they make rich white people pay for it. Next door, you have the Republicans with their restaurant of steamed poultry and veggies. Sure, it's a much healthier diet, but definitely not as much fun to eat. Oh, and you have to pay for the food with the money you earned. Which restaurant do you think is going to have more people eating there? The irony is that the Democrats are the ones who are trying to control how people eat. Republicans are the ones who say, eat what you want. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to be conservative about what and how you eat, so as to prolong enjoyment of good health. That's what it is to conserve and be a conservative, so as to prolong enjoyment instead of being liberal with things that ultimately squander. Getting all American blacks to vote Republican doesn't suit their palate. Republicans are too bland for them. They need their food flavored with the MSG of race baiting and class baiting. Democrats pump that flavor in their food, which is really, really bad for them. But so what? It's delicious. Being made to feel like a victim for many blacks and being made to feel like you're a member of the 99% is comfort food for them. They've been conditioned to feel like it's important for them to identify themselves as the field Negroes and to hate the so-called house Negro. Meanwhile, the so-called house Negro that the race-baiting blacks call us is like, you do realize that slavery was abolished like 150 years ago, yet your mind is still in the fields, a place you've never been. Yet you want to stay brain chained to a place where Democrats wanted to keep you and still want to keep you. You think the Democrats have changed and that the Republicans aren't the party of Lincoln anymore. Democrats haven't changed. They still want you to be dependent on the master, and they're still dependent on you. It's just that now, instead of using blacks to farm cotton, they now use you to farm votes. And you've been suckered into believing that this off-balance circle of dependency is Democrats doing something for black folks. If Democrats do so much for you, why are you still so angry? Why are you still saying we shall overcome as if it hasn't already happened? I'll tell you why overcoming hasn't happened for you. Because you've been suckered into voting for the party that you were supposed to overcome. I'm still not understanding this butthurt logic of hating Republicans because they don't do nothing for black folks. If the Democrats are making life so wonderful for you, why do you need Republicans to do anything for you? The government isn't supposed to do things for you. You're so busy with this entitlement mindset of people doing something for you that you fail to see that the way out of poverty is by doing for others. It's called service. And the better you are at a service, the better you get paid. But you've been conditioned to see service as slavery, just the way the Democrats want it. The Democrats want you to believe that you're entitled to other people being deprived of their rights for your comfort. Democrats haven't changed because that's what slavery is all about, depriving someone else of their rights for the comfort of someone else. And Democrats have suckered you into thinking this is doing something for black folks, which in truth only makes life harder for everybody. Whereas the conservative Republican interpretation of the Constitution is that it's not the government's job to do for you. The government's job is to protect you. So if you want to start a business, the conservative official is the one who guards your business from the liberal official with how much they want to liberally tax and liberally regulate that business, which weakens the hiring power of that business, which makes it harder for you to find a job. But the Democrats will make you think they're doing something good for you because taxing them rich white folks, which is making them pay their fair share. And jobs, whatever. We Democrats are the ones who are really for the black man because we're going to make those rich white business owners pay more in unemployment benefits. Black people, you are voting for the party that fought to keep the slave market legal. You're voting for the party that authored Jim Crow. You're voting for the party that created the KKK. All the bigotry that has so deeply scarred America was the Democrats, and you vote for them. And then you try to justify it by cherry-picking penny-ante BS about a few Republicans who did something that you have to reach way up into your behind to pull out as racism, despite all the institutionalized bigotry of the Democrats. Y'all have been suckered into believing that there was a big party switch because of Barry Goldwater and Lee Atwater. Goldwater got all the votes of legions of Southern white conservatives. Really? You know Goldwater lost, right? If Republicans are all about this bigotry you're talking about that Barry Goldwater was supposedly promoting, then I guess we should have had a President Goldwater. And according to this big switch story, did a bunch of Republicans go and become Democrats? No. All you got is some confused Democrats who voted Republican. Yet despite all the bigotry of the Democrat Party, Barry Goldwater is enough for y'all to get hung up on. A lot of blacks insist on holding to the idea that Republicans are the party of rich white people, and white people benefit from the legacy of slavery. If people really benefited off of the legacy of slavery, then the African continent would be the richest population of citizens in the world. People would ask, wow, how are all of y'all so rich? Well, we're benefiting off the legacy of slavery. There's slave markets in Africa now. Africans have been slave trading since thousands of years, before America was even thought about. Democrats have effectively conditioned many blacks to willingly participate in the Democrats' genocidal campaign against them via Planned Parenthood. But many blacks want to believe it's Republicans that are doing something to them and not doing anything for them. Democrats be like, hey there, my black sister, are you pregnant? We can abort that thing and make someone else pay for it. But if you decide to keep that thing, here's a block of cheese and a check, and there's more where that came from. If you keep those votes coming for us, and make sure you don't have a contributing husband, or else no social assistance for you. And then there's this crap by Snoop Dogg, trying to blame gang violence on Reagan, which was already happening before Reagan was elected. Tookie Williams and Ray Washington set off the Crips in 1969. Sets were forming throughout the 70s. They were already involved with drug trafficking, robbery, extortion, murder, burglary, prostitution, and theft. Due to other rivalries, the Bloods came about as early as 1972. So take that formula of rival gang members trying to be the hardest, add drugs, and time to grow, and I say to you assuredly, that powder keg was gonna blow regardless of Reagan. Reagan had nothing to do with it. You can't blame Reagan for guns in your neighborhood because y'all were happy to buy them and sell them and shoot each other with them. That's your fault. You made millions off rapping about it. You didn't make money off of rapping about after-school programs. Before the 1960s, black folks didn't get to enjoy all these after-school programs. They didn't go around shooting each other. When Republicans and the NRA made sure blacks had guns to protect themselves from the Democrat KKK, they didn't use those guns to shoot each other with. The reason why we ended up with the Black Panthers, and understandably so, was because of the institutionalized bigotry of Democrats. Many of those who were in the Black Panthers ended up taken to the gangs like the Crips. And here's another area where Snoop is full of it. The Crips will try to make their cause seem noble by suggesting that Crips stands for Community Resources for Independent People, as they walk with a cane because looking like a crippled pimp is supposed to be fly. Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg, the Democrat, advocates for social programs. There's nothing independent about social programs, Snoop. That's institutionalized dependency. Everything about these gangs was dependency. Sell debilitating products to people for them to be dependent on, and promote the ideology that people should be dependent on the state because the government should provide for the people. And if we can't depend on the state, we'll act like a bunch of spoiled brats and resort to violence. Reagan had nothing to do with the explosion of gang violence. Reagan's evil. He put crack in our neighborhoods, but I'm gonna go smoke it or sell it. Reagan's evil. He put AIDS in our neighborhood, yet I'm gonna go brag about how many hoes I done dug out or pimped out and blame Reagan for AIDS. Reagan's evil. He put guns in our neighborhoods, but I can't wait to get me one and go shoot somebody just because they've got on a color I don't like. And then I'm gonna make $1 million rapping about it, promote the lifestyle that makes it attractive to others, and blame Reagan. And I'm gonna do other stupid things like post hateful statements against Mitt Romney and accuse Romney of using the N-word all the time. Meanwhile, Snoop has made his living off of using the N-word all the time. And no matter how you say the N-word, whether it's or it ain't friendly. When you listen to gangster rap and they're speaking about fantasies of smoking some other dude, they will say the N-word ending with and it ain't friendly. Side note, there's this stupid theory that if we just keep saying it over and over again, it'll lose its power and lose its meaning. That's a dumb theory and shows the contradiction of liberals. They want to be all about free speech while insisting on political correctness. But this idea of repeating it over and over again will desensitize it and it'll lose its power. Oh, well, I guess you liberals might want to stop repeating climate change over and over again. You wouldn't want it to lose its power. You might want to stop saying separation of church and state over and over again. You wouldn't want it to lose its power. Or on the other side of your so-called logic, if saying the N-word over and over again will cause it to lose its effect, then you should encourage us to say under God in the Pledge of Allegiance over and over again, all the time. So to lose its effect, like saying the N-word over and over again is supposed to. Actually, the country is not getting better for people constantly repeating the word. And the ones who repeat it the most over and over again typically vote Democrat if they vote at all. You want to accuse Republicans of doing it when it's you doing it all day. It's been Democrats propagating racism all day. And they've had blacks hoodwinked for decades. So I dig what Stephen is saying in his suggestion to vote Republican. But it doesn't do much good to vote Republican if you're of the mindset that the government is supposed to subsidize your comforts and interests. They may very well miss the fact that jobs are more available, which leads to more opportunity. When Bush was president, unemployment was at 5%, but they didn't see it because they wanted Bush to do something for them that they would have never been satisfied with anyway, unless he would have blown his brains out, because they were conditioned to only find some sense of satisfaction in hating him so much for being a Republican, the way the Democrat KKK always wanted. a malfunction ritual zonation, and I know you're suckered into believing it's the KKK voting Republican now. Congratulations, you fell for that one too. You're still being herded and manipulated, and the Democrats still have you under their control. Here's a block of cheese and a check.
Remember, and most people don't know this, the Republican Party is the party of Abraham Lincoln. Not bad. Not bad. It's also the party of freedom, equality, and opportunity. People have forgotten it so long now. It is the Democratic Party that is the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow, and the party of opposition. Nothing makes me more honored and proud than to be the nominee of Abraham Lincoln's Republican Party, and we're going to do a job. Our party will fight to bring hope to every forgotten stretch of this country. Once again, we will be one American nation. One American nation. We will be one united people. And we will have one really great future again, believe me.